They laughed at me, my own family, right after I said I had responsibilities I couldn't ignore. Derek smirked first. Then the others joined in, as if my words were the punchline of a tired joke. Dip. Someone whispered, "Zoe Mitchell always pretends she matters," and the whole room burst out again. I stood there holding a message that could change everything. Yet to them, I wasn't worth a second thought. In that moment, surrounded by people who claimed to care, I realized I had never been more alone, and none of them had any idea that within hours, the very thing they mocked me for would bring every voice in that room to silence. I stood in the middle of the crowded living room, the clatter of silverware and overlapping chatter rolling over me like waves determined to drown out any space I tried to hold. Warm light pooled across familiar faces, yet not one of them truly looked at me. Derek caught my eye, his smirk forming even before the sound left his mouth, and then he burst out laughing the moment I mentioned I needed to step away to handle something before the night was over. His voice cut through the air, sharp enough to make a few heads turn. Responsibility. "Zoe, please! You act like the world would fall apart without you." Laughter rippled through the room instantly, loud and careless, as if mocking me was the natural rhythm of the evening. My aunt waved a dismissive hand. Her tone dipped in irritation and condescension. "Oh, come on! It's your mother's birthday. Stop pretending you're so busy." I tightened my grip on my phone, feeling the cold edge of the device press into my palm. The screen lit up with a message I'd been expecting but never wanted to see in this moment. Final request. Need your report ASAP. The words felt heavier than the noise surrounding me, pulling me inward until it seemed like my entire body folded into itself. I could feel the familiar sting, small, sharp, and humiliating, of being reduced to nothing more than a shadow in a room where I was supposed to belong. They had no idea what I'd been carrying, yet they always spoke as if they understood me better than I ever could. I looked up. They were still laughing, still trading looks of satisfaction, as if they'd just done me a favor by putting me in my place, still convinced I was pretending to matter. In that moment, I had never felt more alone standing in the center of my own family, yet somehow outside the borders of being seen. And I didn't know then that within a few hours, every one of those careless laughs would harden into silence, and this room would never feel the same again. I had left Salem before the sun rose, driving 3 long hours through winding mountain roads toward Bend, the place that shaped me and somehow also shrank me. Every time I returned, it felt like stepping back into a version of myself my family insisted was still true, one they clung to despite never really knowing me. To them, I was the one doing small office work, a woman in her 50s without a family, without the charm or success Derek flaunted so easily. The truth sat nowhere near their assumptions. All week, I had been buried in a report on rising contamination levels near an industrial plant a few miles outside Bend. The numbers were unusual enough to trigger red flags, dangerous enough that ignoring them could put thousands of residents at risk. The report I was assembling would determine whether the governor would authorize a full investigation. Every sample, every chart, every projection carried a weight no one in this house could imagine. But it was classified. Even the colleagues closest to me didn't know everything. My family would never be allowed to know. When I walked into the house, noise from the kitchen washed over me, pots clattering, voices rising and falling. My mother handed me an apron without looking twice, her voice clipped with assumption. "Set the table. You're the least occupied." I forced a small smile, swallowing the familiar sting. Somehow, no matter how much time passed, I always ended up in the lowest position, the one expected to obey without question. On the TV in the corner, a news segment flashed about residents complaining of chemical odors in their water. My body reacted before my mind did. I stopped mid-step. Derek immediately grabbed the remote and switched it off. "That channel always exaggerates." My phone buzzed again. "Governor's team needs update by tonight. Do not delay." I turned the screen away quickly before anyone could catch a glimpse. The urgency, the secrecy, the responsibility I had to hold it all alone in a house full of people who assumed I carried nothing. The party hadn't even started when Derek pulled me out to the backyard. The wooden table was already set with a thick stack of documents, the pen laid out as if he expected instant compliance. "Just sign," he said, nudging the pen toward me. The papers were exactly what I feared: authorization to use our family land as collateral for the project he and his wife were chasing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I'd reviewed satellite maps just days before. Our land rested right on the boundary of the suspected contamination zone. Signing those papers could drag the entire family into financial ruin if the investigation moved forward. "I can't sign," I said quietly. "I need time to review." Derek slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the pen jump. "Stop overreacting. This is our chance. You always ruin things." His wife stepped closer, voice soft but sharpened with judgment. "We know finances aren't your strength. But honestly, what do you have to lose?" The words landed like a slap. To them. I wasn't someone with a life or agency. I was someone they could pressure because they believed nothing in my world mattered. I glanced back at the pages and felt the blood drain from my face. A bank form sat tucked between them, clearly stamped co-owner Zoe Mitchell. They had filed the application before even asking. From the edge of the yard, her husband spoke urgently on the phone, voice low but unmistakably tense. "No. The water samples can't get out. If the state pays attention, the whole project collapses." I froze, every thought aligning with brutal clarity. He was referring to the very contamination I had been investigating. The land, the plant, their project. It all connected. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was directly bound to the report I was risking everything to finish, and suddenly, the family conflict I thought I understood shifted into something far more dangerous, something that went beyond loyalty, beyond money, and straight into the heart of what I had been trying to protect. The backyard filled quickly as relatives settled in, laughter rising with the smell of grilled meat and the thudding footsteps of kids chasing one another. It should have felt warm, but all it did was tighten something in my chest. That uneasy sense of standing on thin ice. One wrong step, and everything would crack beneath me. Derek lifted his glass to toast, confidence dripping from every movement. I kept a few steps back, hoping this year I'd pass unnoticed. That hope shattered almost immediately. "To Mom," he announced, and to those his eyes locked on mine, pausing long enough for everyone to follow, who never have anything important to do but somehow are always too busy. Laughter shot across the yard like a spark catching dry grass. Heat spread across my face, but I stayed silent, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. As I shifted slightly to check my phone, Derek lunged and snatched it from my hand, holding it high like a trophy. "Urgent reminder. Governor review pending," he read loudly. Another explosion of laughter. "What's next?" he sneered. "Sending reminders to yourself." I stepped forward to take it back, but a hand brushed my arm lightly. "Relax, Zoe," someone murmured, as if I were the one being unreasonable. My aunt joined in, amused. She always acts like she's handling something big, probably just spam from one of those ad sites. A voice behind her added, "What responsibility does she even have?" The chorus of laughter rose again. A niece tugged at her mother and whispered just loud enough, "Mom! What does Aunt Zoe even do?" Nobody ever knows. More laughter. I tried to move away, but my sister-in-law stepped in front of me. "Stay here. We still need your signature. Don't pretend you have anywhere important to be." Dozens of eyes pressed on me, not curious, not compassionate, just judgmental. They believed they could order me around because they decided I had nothing to lose. In the distance, the sky over Bend took on a faint haze, the setting sun bleeding into an unnerving shade of orange. No one noticed, but I recognized the warning instantly, the same shift I'd seen reflected in the data all week. Something was happening. Avoiding conflict wasn't an option anymore. Unsai. They were pushing me toward an edge none of them realized existed. After the public humiliation, I slipped into the kitchen, hoping a moment alone would steady me. But the quiet barely lasted before Derek and his wife followed, the tension entering the room with them. "No one believes you," Derek said. "That report you mentioned probably isn't even serious. Just sign and go." I drew in a breath. Anchoring myself. I'm not signing without a reason, I said. What reason? He snapped. Are you imagining you have some world-saving mission again? His wife placed the stack of land documents on the counter. If you don't sign, the project dies, she said softly, though the sharpness beneath her tone was unmistakable. And if the plant gets investigated, my husband loses his job. Do you want that? I froze. She didn't just know the risk, she was trying to bury it. In the living room, someone turned on the TV, and a news report broke through the noise. Chemical levels in the Bend River have spiked. Residents suspect the industrial plant 4 miles away. My heart dropped. That was the plant her husband worked at. Not rumors. Not exaggeration. Fact. Derek leaned over quickly to shut it off. Fake news. They make things up. My phone buzzed. Governor to review emergency brief tonight. Time was slipping fast. Derek slammed his hand on the counter. Zoe thinks she's so important. Always hiding things. Always claiming she's busy. She just doesn't want to help her own family. Relatives drifted toward the doorway. Staring, whispering. Not one person stood beside me. Not one asked what I was carrying. I wanted to tell them I was trying to protect the entire town, including them, but confidentiality sealed my mouth shut. The weight in my throat felt like a stone. And I knew then silence was no longer possible. Something was coming, and none of them were prepared for it. The mood of the party shifted as the last of the sunlight drained from the yard, stretching long shadows across the grass. The laughter grew louder, but instead of warmth, it carried a sharpness that made the air feel thinner. I just wanted to leave, to get back to the report waiting for me. But Derek stepped in front of the back door before I could slip away. Where are you going? He demanded, blocking my path. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. You're not leaving. You haven't signed. I tried to keep my voice steady as more eyes drifted toward us. I really need to get back to work. You don't understand. No one needs to understand, he snapped, waving me off as though I were an inconvenience. It's a family party. Stop pretending you're too busy. You just want to act important. My mother stepped out then, her tone at first sounding like a shield. Derek, don't talk to your sister like, but the rest of her sentence landed like a blow. But Zoe, at least tonight, don't ruin the mood. Stay. Something inside me hollowed out. Even she thought I was exaggerating, that whatever I had to do couldn't possibly matter. I lifted my phone, ready to show her, but she dismissed it with a flick of her hand. I don't understand those things you do. Put it away. She walked off, leaving a cold distance between us that felt wider than the yard itself. My sister-in-law appeared next, pulling me toward a dim corner of the lawn where the fading light cast her face in a pale glow. She gripped my wrist tightly. Listen, she said, voice low but slicing through me. If you sign, you help our family. If you don't, you hurt us. I pulled my wrist free, my voice trembling but firm. I'm not signing, and I'm not hurting anyone. Her lips tightened. You'll regret this. Behind me. My uncle's voice boomed, dripping with ridicule. Zoe acts like she's carrying national secrets. Ridiculous! Laughter erupted again, louder than before, pressing in on me until it felt hard to breathe. They had no idea what I was carrying, yet they mocked it with ease. Then my phone vibrated. A coded message flashed on the screen. Governor en route. ETA 25 minutes. Prepare. It felt like a detonation inside my chest. The governor coming here to this house, while they were laughing at me like a punchline. I looked around the yard, every face filled with amusement at my expense, completely unaware of what was about to descend on them. The truth they'd ignored for years was heading straight toward their doorstep. A chill coursed through me, not fear of him arriving, but fear of what it would do to them when everything snapped into place. I straightened my spine, steadied my breath, and whispered silently to myself, the storm is coming. I returned to the table, trying to keep my expression calm even as my heart pounded. No one noticed anything different. They were still laughing, still tossing comments about how I liked to pretend I was busy. A sudden gust of wind swept across the yard, rattling the hanging lights until they swung violently. Conversations faltered. From somewhere beyond the neighborhood, a deep engine rumble approached heavy, unfamiliar. Derek glanced toward the front gate and shrugged. Probably someone lost. But I knew better. A faint wash of blue and red flickered across the glass door, catching the attention of a nearby child. There are a lot of cars outside, chairs scraped across the deck as people moved toward the noise. I held my breath. Then all at once the engines cut off. Silence spread through the house like a thick fog. The front door opened. Two men in dark suits stepped inside. No badges, no introductions. Their posture alone froze the room. "Ma'am," one said, eyes scanning the space with precision. "We need to perform a quick security sweep." Every voice died. Confusion rippled across the room. Derek burst into laughter, loud and incredulous. "Security. Hear what? Zoe, did you hire them to make yourself look important?" He glanced around for validation. People laughed with him, because that was what they always did. I didn't react. I just watched him, feeling a cold detachment settle over me. Footsteps sounded behind the agent, steady, deliberate. A figure stepped through the doorway, tall and composed, with the unmistakable presence of someone used to entering rooms where decisions shift the fate of thousands. No introductions needed, no explanation required. It was the governor of Oregon. The room solidified into silence. His eyes swept over the relatives, my uncle, my aunt, Derek, my sister-in-law, passing each of them without acknowledgement. Then he stopped in front of me and took a step closer. My heartbeat echoed like a drum inside my ears. "Zoe," he said, voice firm and clear. "Do you have the report?" A soft gasp rose from someone behind me. A glass slipped from a hand and shattered on the floor. Derek stepped back, his face draining of color. And in that suspended moment, the truth they refused to see finally stood undeniable in front of them. The governor of Oregon stood in my mother's small living room, as if he had stepped into a crisis command center. Not a birthday party that had been loud with jokes at my expense only minutes earlier. The dim overhead light struck his dark suit, cutting through the chaos and freezing every whisper in the room. All the mocking about my so-called responsibilities died instantly. He looked only at me, never at Derek, never at anyone else. "Zoe," he said, his voice firm enough to still the air. "I need your report. The situation can't wait." The room seemed to tilt. On one side stood years of being dismissed. On the other, the truth I had carried alone. I reached into my bag, pulled out the encrypted USB I'd guarded for days, and placed it in his hand. "Everything is inside," I said quietly. "The water samples, the projection model, the contamination spread." He nodded to his security team. A hard case opened, and a laptop was set on my mother's birthday table between half-eaten cake and abandoned drinks. No one dared move. "These numbers," the governor murmured, eyes narrowing. "This could shut down the entire industrial zone." My sister-in-law blanched. Her husband grabbed the chair for balance. Derek stammered. Why would Zoe know any of this?" A security agent answered. "She's the senior analyst leading the assessment." Silence crushed the room. The governor turned to Derek. "Your sister may have just saved thousands of people." Then, to me, "Zoe, do you stand by these findings?" "I do." And for the first time, they saw who I really was. The governor left for an emergency briefing, and as the door clicked shut, the entire house fell into an eerie, ash-heavy silence. The escort vehicles faded down the street, leaving behind a room full of pale, stunned faces, the same faces that had laughed at me only minutes earlier. The tension hung so thick, it felt like it was pressing against my ribs. My family stared at me, as if they were seeing someone entirely new, someone they had never bothered to acknowledge before. I didn't speak. I simply waited, watching to see whether they would finally face the truth or cling to the illusions they'd relied on to belittle me for years. My phone buzzed sharply in the quiet. "Governor has initiated preliminary shutdown protocol." The plant, her husband's workplace, would be investigated immediately. My sister-in-law staggered. "Zoe, do you know what this will do to us?" "You know." "Don't you?" "Yes," I said. "I tried to warn you. None of you listened." Derek lunged for the land documents. "If the area's a risk, we can't use the property. Everything's ruined." His voice shook. "That's why I wouldn't sign," I said. He froze, his excuses stripped away. My mother stepped forward, trembling. Zoe, I thought you had nothing to carry. I was wrong. You protected all of us, while we never protected you. Then Derek exploded. Desperate. You still ruined everything for me, no? I said. Steady at last. I just refused to join your mistake. Silence swallowed the room. I picked up my coat. I'm done here. And I walked out, no one brave enough to stop me. Stepping out of my mother's house, I felt the cold bend wind brush against my face, sharp but cleansing, as if the air outside carried a freedom I had been denied inside those walls. The birthday lights behind me dimmed with every step toward my car, shrinking into a distant glow I no longer owed anything to. I didn't look back. For the first time. I didn't need to. A few weeks later, a small envelope arrived, my mother's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. You deserved more respect than I ever gave you. I'm sorry I didn't see you. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer, not to forget, but to leave it in the past where it finally belonged. One quiet Sunday, I walked along the Willamette River, sunlight scattering across the water like fractured glass. In that stillness, the truth settled inside me. The governor's arrival forced them to see me, but this peace was something only I could give myself. And with that, I stepped forward into a life that was entirely, finally mine.